Anyone reading the headlines today can see the breadth and reach of sanctions. The world is now looking very different through the eyes of a compliance officer. Transparency is the fundamental starting point for any meaningful compliance program. One has to know who one's customers are. A number of the most headline-grabbing enforcement cases in the world of sanctions reflect conduct that may have been 5, 10, or 15 years old. Where you see conduct that we think, well, these institutions really ought to have known better, we might have a small and far smaller sanctions enforcement response. When you have that constellation of repeated activity going on over a period of years with the knowledge of senior members of an institution, then I think you see the headline-grabbing enforcement cases. I think that the term is almost too broad, de-risking. The appropriate compliance response is going to involve saying no to certain customers who apply for accounts or closing accounts for certain customers.
In fact, I can remember as a former regulator telling banks, don't worry, you need to know your customer and you need to have a sense of your customer's customer, but you don't actually need to drill down behind those accounts. That's not the case anymore.
When you look at the operational nature of the types of scanning that we're doing, we're really developing those future leaders that are going to have to grapple with a brand new world.
We need to make sure we're training people to still be compliance officers, but let's make sure that we're also incentivizing the other part, which is finding the bad people doing the bad things.
5 years ago, being able to add a name or a list was far more challenging. We actually now can make it real time.
Data today is the lifeblood, as it always has been. But the one thing worse than not knowing is to have information that sits somewhere that people didn't know they had.
There's not one of our institutions that isn't committed to doing this the right way.
Whoever maintains the utility, the fact that they house the information, right, and the fact that the control environment that they have around the access and the verification of that information are equally important, probably the latter even more important.
The utilities that are emerging as leaders in this space are industry owned, so it's not happening to us, we're part of it.
We have people go out to 1,500 or so correspondent banking clients of ours on an annual basis or every other year depending on the risk ranking. If we were able to get a utility that can collect all of that for us, that is a huge benefit.
As we know with the work that SWIFT have set up in terms of creating some kind of sanctions screening capability, it is a utility that the banks can use. The decisioning still comes back to the bank, but part of that process has now been utilitized.
Just from a correspondent banking perspective, this is a relationship business. So it's no longer, do you know your customer? It's, do you know your customer enough? Do we know our customer's customer?
We need to learn from these enforcement actions. We need to read each paragraph very carefully and say, what does this mean to us? What kinds of testing do we need to put in place? What kinds of controls do we have to check on?
Look beyond your business silos. Banks are kind of notorious for silos, and it drives the regulators crazy. Experience is something you get when you got what you didn't want. Well, somebody else got what they didn't want, and shame on us if we don't try and learn from it.